Commander Eric's fingers tightened around the control stick as his ship shook again. Warning lights blinked all over the dashboard. A red light flashed, missile lock detected. He cursed under his breath and tried to steer the scout ship. Left, but it was too late. The explosion hit the rear engine like a hammer. Flames burst out into the black space. The ship spun, sparks flying from broken wires, and oxygen hissed from a torn panel. Eric slammed into the sidewall, his helmet cracking slightly. Blood ran down from his forehead. His vision blurred. Through the cracked window, he saw stars, spinning in all directions. "This is Scout Ship Delta 4. He shouted into the comm, his voice rough and fast. "I've been hit. I repeat, I've been." The rest of the message never left the ship. A second explosion rocked the hull. The ship tore in two, and the cockpit ejected just in time. Eric's body slammed into the restraints as the emergency pod shot away. Spinning wildly into deep space. Inside the escape pod, everything was silent now. Eric's breathing was heavy. His heart pounded against his chest. Blood floated in tiny drops inside his helmet. His vision was dim. His suit's AI whispered warnings, oxygen low, blood pressure falling, life signs critical. He reached up, slowly, and tapped the beacon switch. A soft green light blinked once, then again. The signal was sent. He was drifting, lost. His fingers twitched as he tried to stay awake, but the cold crept into his bones. Outside, the stars remained silent. Far away, in the dark part of the galaxy called the Black Wound, something ancient moved. It was not a ship. It was not a machine. It was a warrior. Her name was Vela, and she stood 12 feet tall, her body wrapped in armor made of silver bone and star metal. Her hair was like burning ash, and her glowing eyes scanned the stars. She had seen the explosion. She had seen the human pod spinning like trash. And now, she was moving toward it. Eric's body was barely alive when the pod stopped moving. Something had grabbed it. Something strong. He couldn't speak, couldn't open his eyes, but he felt it. A deep thud, thud, thud. Footsteps. Maybe he heard metal tear open. Then silence, then warmth. A large hand touched his chest. The scent of something wild, like mountain snow and fire, filled his nose. Vela looked down at the tiny creature inside the broken pod. So small, so fragile. His blood was still leaking. His chest moved slow to slow. She could have left him. Her people did not help humans. They were rivals, dangerous, even feared. But something about his broken body, something about how he still breathed despite the wounds, it stirred something inside her. A memory, maybe, or a feeling she thought she had buried long ago, without a word. She lifted him gently into her arms. The alien landscape below was harsh black rocks, frozen rivers, and glowing plants that pulsed with strange light. Vela carried him through the cold wind, her massive legs stepping over ice and stone. Her breath steamed in the air. She moved fast, but careful not to hurt the human more. She reached a cave carved into a cliff. Inside, warm crystal walls glowed faintly. There were signs of old fires, and dried herbs hung from the roof. She laid Eric down on soft skins and removed parts of his armor with care. His skin was pale, his lips blue. She pressed a warm cloth to his wounds, grinding alien roots into a paste and rubbing it over the bleeding skin. Her hands, though large and rough, worked with care. She had done this before for others, long ago. Eric's chest rose slowly. The warmth returned to his skin. Vela sat beside him, silent, watching. Back in space, no human ship had responded to his beacon. No one knew where he was. No one knew who had picked him up. And yet, in the arms of a giant alien warrior, the human had not died. Not yet. He woke slowly, as if rising from the bottom of a deep ocean. At first, there was only warmth. Then, the faint scent of burning herbs. Soft light danced above him, like stars in a cave. His eyes blinked open. Everything was strange. He wasn't in a medical bay. He wasn't even in a human structure. The ceiling above him shimmered with glowing crystal veins. The walls pulsed with a dim blue light. His chest ached. His ribs were wrapped in thick, alien cloth. He tried to move, but pain stopped him. And then, he saw her. A massive figure knelt nearby, facing a fire that crackled with blue flames. She was tall, impossibly tall, with armor that shimmered like frost and steel. Her long hair flowed like silver thread down her back. She moved slowly, placing a strange root into a boiling pot. He froze. His instinct screamed danger, but his body was too weak to run. He reached for his sidearm. It was gone. She turned, to glowing eyes locked onto his. They didn't flash with anger or hunger. They softened. The alien warrior rose and stepped toward him. Her footsteps were heavy, yet there was no aggression in them. Her face, though fierce and strong, held something unexpected concern. Eric tensed, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. She crouched down beside him. Her hand, massive compared to his, reached out not for a weapon, but to touch his forehead gently. Her fingers were warm, calloused, careful. He shivered. She said something in her language, low, melodic, and deep. He didn't understand, but her tone calmed him. Eric opened his mouth. "Where am I?" She tilted her head, repeating a word softly, almost like she was testing his language. He tried to sit up. Pain screamed through his body, and he gasped. She placed one hand gently on his shoulder and guided him back down. There was no force in her touch, just strength with care. He was used to danger, war zones, enemies who showed no mercy. But this was something else. She stood again and walked to the fire, stirring the pot with a long metal stick. Steam rose, filling the cave with a warm scent like spice and soil. She poured the liquid into a curved shell and returned to him, sitting beside him. She lifted his head slightly and brought the drink to his lips. He hesitated. She waited. Her eyes said, "I won't force you." He drank. The liquid was bitter, but warm. It spread through his body, like heat in winter. The pain dulled slightly. She spoke again, slowly, carefully. He tried to listen, but her language was strange. Still, he recognized one word repeated twice as she pointed to herself. "Vela, Vela." He whispered. She nodded. Then she pointed to him. "Eric." He replied. A pause, then she said it. Slowly, "Eric." She tried again, smoother. This time, he couldn't help but smile weakly. Their first words exchanged not through full sentences, but through the simplest of names. She stood once more, her tall frame moving with grace. As she turned her back, Eric noticed something unusual beneath. Her armor, her shoulders weren't tense with aggression, but with weariness, like she carried more than just weapons on her back. She picked up a large animal pelt and brought it to him, wrapping it gently round his chest and legs. The fabric was heavy but soft, and it smelled like mountain wind. She moved to a far corner of the cave, near the entrance, and sat on a stone slab. Her weapon rested nearby, a long curved blade made from bone and metal. Even seated, she looked like a statue, still and alert, but her eyes drifted to him often, checking, not like a guard watches a prisoner, like a protector watches the wounded. Eric blinked slowly, his body relaxed. The warmth, the strange drink, her careful movements, it all told him something he didn't want to believe. That she had saved him. Why? What did she want? The last thing he remembered was the cold black of space, the explosions, the feeling of dying alone. Now he was here, wrapped in warmth, watched over by a creature twice his size, who treated him with more care than some medics he'd known. Sleep pulled at him again. As his eyes closed, he whispered the word, "Vela." She looked over her shoulder and gave the smallest nod. In that moment, he knew whatever world he'd landed in, whatever species she was, whatever rules were broken to bring him here, she didn't see him as just another human, and for reasons he couldn't understand, she had chosen to keep him alive, even when the universe had left him for dead. Wind howled through the canyon as dusk fell across the alien world. The sky above turned violet, then darkened to a deep indigo. Stars began to flicker, but the cave stayed warm, glowing with its strange blue crystal light. Eric sat propped against the wall, his breath steady but shallow. His body was healing, but he still couldn't walk on his own. Vela stood at the cave entrance, a tall shadow against the fading sky. Her silver hair shimmered like liquid moonlight. The long spear she held tapped the stone gently, as if listening for danger. She hadn't spoken to him again, not with words, but she didn't need to. Every time he stirred or coughed, she turned. Every time he shifted, She moved closer. She was listening, watching. Tonight, something felt different. She didn't sit by the fire like before. Instead, she walked to him slowly and crouched again, meeting his eyes. She said something in her language softer this time, then offered her hand. Eric blinked. Go where? She pointed outside. He hesitated. His legs were still weak, and pain bloomed in his side every time he moved. But something about her tone told him it was important. He reached for her hand. She lifted him with ease. He expected her to carry him in her arms, but instead, she guided his arm over her shoulder and stooped to match his height. His feet touched the ground, but she held most of his weight. She didn't let him fall. They walked slowly out of the cave, stepping into the cold night. The air stung, crisp and full of distant smells, wet stone, strange flowers, and something metallic. Their path was narrow, winding between massive stones and glowing plants. Every time he stumbled, her arm tightened, steadying him every time. He looked up at her. He caught something in her eyes, a look not of duty, but of quiet care. The two of them moved together through the alien night, man and giant, his body against hers, her warmth against his skin, their breath rising like steam. They reached a small ledge overlooking the canyon. Below, rivers of glowing light flowed between the rock streams, of bioluminescent water that shimmered like stars had fallen to the ground. Strange birds flew past on silent wings. Somewhere far off, a beast roared, but Vela didn't flinch. She sat down and pulled him close beside her, careful not to hurt him. He could feel her armor press against him, but beneath it, he felt the shape of her body, powerful, warm, and unmistakably feminine. He looked up at her. She looked down at him. There was silence, but it wasn't empty. She reached into a pouch on her belt and took out a small stone, smooth and black, then handed it to him. He turned it over in his palm. It was warm. She tapped her chest and said, Kathor. Then she pointed at the stone and said it again. Eric frowned, confused. She smiled slightly and pressed her hand over his heart. Kathor, she repeated. His eyes widened. Heart, she nodded. Eric touched the stone again. This was no ordinary gift. It meant something. Maybe to her people, giving this was a sign of bond, a promise. He held it tightly. Thank you, he whispered. She didn't answer. She just watched him, her head tilted slightly, eyes glowing like two pale moons. Her hand remained on his chest for a moment longer than necessary, and then just for a second her fingers curled slightly, touching him not like a healer, but like someone who truly wanted him to stay alive. It was subtle, but it changed everything. A breeze picked up, and she pulled a thick cloak from her back, wrapping it around both of them. He didn't resist. The cold faded. The night grew quieter. Eric leaned his head against her shoulder, and to his surprise, she didn't move away. He spoke softly. Why did you save me, Vela? She didn't answer. Maybe she didn't understand, or maybe she didn't want to speak it aloud. But her hand moved again, slowly wrapping around his shoulder, holding him closer. Her body was like a wall, strong, solid, and yet there was something soft behind that strength. Not just her warmth, not just the curve of her armor or the way she protected him, but the way she stayed awake all night to watch him breathe. The way she guided his steps like he was something precious. The way she held him now not as a burden, but as someone she refused to let go. For the first time in days, Eric's eyes closed without fear. Not because he felt safe, but because he trusted her. The ground vibrated before the sound reached them. Eric opened his eyes sharply. The calm of the canyon ledge instantly shattered. Vela was already standing, her spear in hand, her entire body tense. Her ears twitched at the low rumble echoing. Through the rocks, something was coming, and it wasn't small. He tried to push himself up, but his ribs screamed in protest. Vela turned toward him, her face suddenly different, harder. She grabbed his arm and pulled him up with force, cradling him against her chest like a wounded cub. She ran. The quiet night they had shared was gone in an instant. Flashes of green and silver appeared in the distance. Shadows moved fast across the ridge line above the cave. More of her kind, massive, armored, holding weapons like glowing blades and blasters shaped from bones. Their eyes shone with anger. Eric looked up at her. They're looking for me, aren't they? Vela didn't answer. She moved like wind through the stone maze, her long legs carrying them far from the ledge. The crystal-lit paths they had walked before now seemed tight and dangerous. Behind them, the growls grew louder. Shouts in her language echoed off the rocks. They were calling her name. She didn't stop. At the edge of a narrow ravine, she finally set Eric down behind a large boulder. He groaned, gripping his side, but stayed silent. Vela turned and drew her blade, her breathing deep and focused. She wasn't going to run anymore. The first warrior appeared moments later. He was taller than her, broader too, with heavier armor and tribal marks carved across his chest. His eyes landed on Eric instantly, and his expression twisted with disgust. He growled something in their language, pointing at the human. Vela stepped in front of Eric and said nothing. She didn't raise her weapon, not yet. Her voice, when she spoke, was sharp and clear, slicing through the tension like lightning. The warrior answered with a roar, stepping closer. Then more came too, then four, all huge, armored, and furious. Eric's heart raced. He couldn't understand the words, but the message was clear. They wanted him gone. Dead, maybe. They didn't trust humans. Maybe they'd lost someone in a war with Earth. Or maybe they just feared what they didn't know. One of the newcomers shouted again. This time, he pointed at Vela, then at Eric, then spat on the ground. Vela's hands tightened around her blade. Another warrior, a female with a jagged scar across her cheek, stepped forward. She lowered her weapon and spoke calmly, but her tone was firm. She gestured toward the canyon, as if offering a way out, one where Vela left the human behind. Eric looked up at Vela. They're giving you a choice, aren't they? She didn't move. The male warrior stepped forward again and slammed his weapon into the ground, demanding an answer. Vela turned her head slightly. Her eyes found Eric's, and in them, he saw something raw, not fear, not regret, loyalty. She raised her blade. The others stepped back slightly, not in fear but in surprise. To raise your weapon against your own clan was not a choice made lightly. They shouted in anger now, the female with the scar trying again to speak sense into her. But Vela's body language had already spoken. She wouldn't surrender the human, not for peace, not for mercy, not even for her place among them. Eric's voice was barely audible. You don't have to do this for me. She didn't answer. She lowered her blade not in defeat, but as a sign of final decision. She turned and walked back to him, crouched low, and gently lifted him once more into her arms. And then, in front of her tribe, she walked away. The voices behind them screamed with fury. One of the warriors lunged forward, but the female with the scar raised her hand, stopping him. Perhaps she understood what had just happened. Vela was no longer one of them. She was exile now. Eric's head rested against her chest as they climbed down a steep ravine, deeper into the unknown wilds. His thoughts raced, confused and heavy. She had chosen him over her own people, over her name, over her life. He looked up at her again. Her face was calm, unreadable, but her jaw was tight. Her eyes stared straight ahead. No hesitation, no second thoughts. She didn't look back. They traveled until night swallowed everything, and the sky above them filled with silent stars. Vela found another cave, deeper and darker than the last, hidden behind thick vines. Inside, she laid him down gently and collapsed beside him, exhausted but alert. He reached out, touched her arm. Why? Finally, she looked at him, her voice low, almost broken. She placed her hand on his chest, then her own, and whispered just one word. Heart. And, for the first time, Eric truly understood what that word meant to her. The cave they had found was deep and hidden beneath twisted trees that glowed faintly under the alien moonlight. The outside world raged with cold wind and distant calls of predators, but inside, it was quiet, almost too quiet. Eric lay on a bed of moss and thick hides, his side still aching, but healing. Vela sat nearby, unmoving, her long blade across her knees. Her eyes stayed fixed on the cave entrance, listening. He watched her from the corner of his eye. She hadn't spoken since they left her people. Her body remained still like a statue, but something had changed. She no longer held herself like a warrior proud of her rank. Now, she looked like someone carrying the weight of being alone. He shifted with a grunt, and immediately her head turned. She was alert in a heartbeat, crawling over with smooth strength and checking his wound with careful fingers. Her hand pressed against his chest, then her brow. She didn't say anything, just nodded and returned to her spot. "You gave up everything," he whispered, voice low. "Your clan, your place for me." She didn't answer. Her silence said enough that the fire between them crackled softly. He looked at her again, her massive frame lit by flickering light. The armor was cracked in places now, dirt and scratches showing signs of the journey. Beneath the plated chest and shoulder guards, he saw a blood knot his. "You're hurt," he said. She glanced down, then away, as if it didn't matter. "But it did. You didn't treat your own wounds," he added, struggling to sit. "Why?" She gave no answer, but her body language changed. The stiffness in her spine, the way her fingers curled slightly, she had chosen to protect him so fiercely. She forgot herself. Eric pushed himself up and crawled closer. She turned her head sharply as if to stop him, but he ignored it. "You saved me, again and again. Let me help you now." Vela stared at him, confused. She was not used to kindness from prey, or from anyone. He reached for her arm, and slowly, she let him remove the outer piece of her armor. Beneath it, a deep cut ran along her side, sealed only with dried blood and scraps of torn cloth. He winced at the sight. "You fought for me, like I was one of your own," he murmured, cleaning the wound with a cloth. "But you're the one bleeding now." Her muscles twitched under his touch, but she didn't pull away. His hands were small compared to her towering form, but they were gentle. He wrapped the wound in clean cloth and secured it. She watched his every move, breathing shallow. When he finished, she looked at the bandage, then at him. A long silence passed, then she reached out and placed her hand over his. It was the first time she touched him without urgency. It wasn't to steady him or protect him, it was to say something without words. "Thank you," or maybe something more. The fire burned, lower as the night deepened. She unwrapped a second cloak and, instead of placing it on herself, draped it over both of them. Her body pressed lightly to his side, and she pulled him in gently, careful not to hurt his ribs. Her warmth surrounded him like armor. Eric looked up at her face. Her eyes were softer now, no longer glowing with the same sharp intensity. Her hand rested over his heart again, repeating that same gentle motion from before. Kothor. He placed his own hand over hers. "My heart too, Vela." She tilted her head, curious. "You have it," he said, even if she didn't understand the words. He didn't know what they were now. She was 12 feet tall, a warrior of a species who once saw humans as dangerous, and yet she had held him like glass, protected him like a mate, given him warmth, safety, her own blood. Was it possible? Something deeper was forming here. He didn't know. But as her arms slowly wrapped around him and she rested her chin gently above his head, he no longer felt lost. He felt claimed. The wind outside howled louder, but neither of them moved. Her breathing was steady. Her heartbeat, deep and slow, vibrated through her chest into him. Eric had never felt smaller or safer. Vela said something again in her language. This time, it sounded softer, almost like a lullaby. Her lips moved near his ear, and though he couldn't understand the words, he closed his eyes and let the rhythm of her voice carry him into sleep. He would never forget how she had chosen him. Not with words, but with every touch, every step away from her people, every drop of blood she gave. She wasn't just a warrior. She was something far more powerful. She was his. Morning never came with sunlight in this part of the world. Instead, a slow glow crept across the cave walls as the crystals warmed. Eric stirred beneath the thick cloak, blinking at the blue haze above him. He turned his head slightly and found Vela still beside him, her arm wrapped around his chest, holding him close as if she'd been guarding him all night. Her breathing was steady, deep, but something was wrong. He listened closer. Her breaths were slower than usual, not calm-weak. He sat up carefully and looked at her face. Her skin had lost its usual shimmer. Her lips were dry, and the glow in her eyes was dim. He pulled the cloak off her shoulder and saw that the wound on her side had bled through the bandage. "Vela," he whispered, She didn't move. His heart pounded. He grabbed her wrist, checking her pulse. It was there but faint. He gently shook her. "Hey, don't do this. Don't fade on me now." Her eyes opened slowly, just a sliver. Her lips parted but no words came. Her head tilted back against the wall. He saw it clearly now. Fever. She had been protecting him, walking through freezing nights and fighting her own kind, all while a deep infection was growing inside her. Eric looked around the cave. There was nothing here that could help her. No herbs, no tools, no answers. He had to do something. She had saved him when he was too weak to stand. Now it was his turn. "I'm coming back," he told her, tightening the cloak around her. "Stay alive, Vela." He picked up the small curved blade she kept near her side and stepped out of the cave. The cold bit into him instantly, but he didn't care. He moved quickly, limping over stone and through glowing vines, scanning the ground for any sign of the plants she had used on him before. He remembered the shape: dark red leaves, thick roots. Hours passed. His body ached, but he found one patch of the root, then another. He filled his arms with as much as he could carry, then turned back, his breath fogging with each step. When he reached the cave, she hadn't moved. He dropped beside her, slicing the roots open and grinding them with water from a crystal pool nearby. The paste smelled bitter and sharp, like metal and ash. He pressed it to her, wound and wrapped it tight. She groaned softly at the touch. "That's it," he whispered. "You feel that good? That means you're still in there." He dipped a cloth in the warm water and brushed it over her face. Slowly, her skin cooled. He offered her sips between cracked lips. She swallowed, just barely. Time passed. He didn't sleep. He didn't leave her side. He kept her warm, held her close, and whispered stories about Earth, hoping the sound of his voice might keep her from slipping away. Once, in the middle of the night, she stirred and whispered his name, not perfectly but close enough. "Hey, Rick." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm here," he said, holding her massive hand tightly. "I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, she was stronger. Her eyes opened wider. Her breathing steadied. When she looked at him, there was recognition and something more. She reached for his hand and squeezed it. "You stayed," she rasped, the words broken but clear. "I had to." He smiled. "You didn't give me much choice. You carried me through hell. I figured I'd return the favor." She chuckled faintly, a strange and deep sound that echoed off the cave walls. It was the first time he heard her laugh, and it was beautiful. He helped her sit up slowly, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. She leaned against him, heavy and warm, her head resting beside his. Outside, the alien wind roared again, but they didn't hear it the same way now. The danger hadn't vanished, but neither had their bond. Eric held her tighter. "You're not alone anymore." She looked down at him, brushing her fingers over his jaw. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent. "No, not alone," she repeated. They sat in silence, wrapped together, neither warrior nor human speaking more than they needed to. Their connection had passed words long ago. It was in the way she leaned into him without armor now, in the way he tended her wounds without fear, in the way their hearts beat together, steady and sure. That night, as they lay side by side beneath one shared cloak, Vela whispered something in her language. She placed her palm on his chest, then on her own. She said it again and again. Eric didn't understand the exact words, but he understood the meaning. He touched her hand, nodded slowly, and whispered the only word that mattered now: yes. The night sky burned with the glow of descending lights, bright, artificial, and unmistakably human. Eric stared up from the cave entrance, heart pounding. A ship was breaking through the cloud layer above, engines roaring low across the mountains. They had found him. He stepped back into the cave, where Vela sat beside the fire. Her wounds mostly healed now, her strength returning. She looked at him with calm eyes, but he could see the tension behind them. She knew what the ship meant: rescue, separation. He knelt beside her. "That's a human search ship. If I go out there, they'll bring me home." Vela didn't react. She simply picked up his jacket folded neatly beside her and held it out to him. He took it slowly. Their hands brushed. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then she stood, towering over him, and turned to face the entrance. They walked together toward the ledge where the ship's lights danced across the rocks. It hovered just above a flat clearing, sending out a pair of figures in exosuits. They carried scanners, rifles, and med packs. One of them pointed when they spotted Eric, Commander Eric Vance. One of the men shouted. Eric nodded, raising his hand. Slowly, "Yeah, it's me, thank God," the other said, stepping forward. "We've been tracking that beacon for days. We didn't think anyone could survive this sector." "Are you injured?" "I was. Not anymore," Eric replied. The first rescuer glanced behind Eric and froze. "What is that?" Eric turned. Slightly, Vela had stepped into view, calm but firm. Her blade was on her back, not in her hand. But her sheer size and presence made both men tense instantly. "Easy," Eric said quickly. "She's the reason I'm alive." The second rescuer's hand moved toward his weapon. "That's a Extran warrior, isn't it?" "They're hostile. She saved me," Eric repeated. "When my ship exploded. When I was bleeding out. When no one else was here." The first rescuer whispered something into his comm. Backup would be coming. Vela remained still. Eric turned to her. "They're scared. Of you." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes dimmed. She understood. He stepped in front of her, facing the soldiers. "I'm not leaving without her." The men exchanged looks. "That's not your call to make, sir. We don't know her intentions." "I do," Eric said. "She's already made her choice. She turned on her own people to protect me. She gave up everything. I won't repay that with betrayal." The ship's ramp lowered. A senior officer descended, a woman in dark armor with captain stripes. She looked at Eric first, then at Vela, her eyes narrowing. "Report, Commander," she said. Eric stood taller. "This warrior saved my life, treated my wounds, fed me, protected me from her own kind. I request she be granted safe passage under my authority, not standard protocol." The officer replied, "These species are classified under potential threats." Eric stepped closer to Vela. "So are humans, in most parts of the galaxy. Doesn't mean we're all killers." The captain looked between them. Vela lowered her eyes for the first time, her posture shifting slightly. She turned as if to walk away, back toward the wilderness. Eric grabbed her hand. "Don't," he said quietly. "Please don't go." She paused, then looked at him. She gently placed her hand over his heart again. "Kathor," the captain sighed. "Commander, are you certain?" "I'm not just certain," Eric said. "I owe her everything." The silence stretched. Finally, the captain raised her hand. "We'll scan her. If she's clean, no trackers, no hostiles, she goes with us. Under your custody." Eric nodded. "Fair." The med team moved in, scanners humming. Vela didn't flinch as they passed the devices over her body. Her pulse remained calm. Her eyes only followed Eric. "Clear," the medic said. The captain turned toward the ship. "Bring them aboard." Vela looked back toward the trees one last time. Her home was out there, but her future, it was standing beside her now, offering his hand. She took it. Together, they walked up the ramp. Inside, humans stared, some in shock, some in fear, but no one stopped them. In a quiet corner of the ship, Eric wrapped her in a warm thermal blanket. She sat on the floor, knees drawn up, trying to disappear into the metal walls. She didn't belong here, not yet. Eric sat beside her, leaning into her side. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. She tilted her head and rested it lightly on top of his. The engines roared, and the ship lifted off, leaving behind the wilderness that had brought them together. Eric held her hand tightly as stars filled the window. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning.